Hey everyone, welcome to yet another of our sushi panels. Right now we have an amazing set of panelists who are going to be here discussing what the future of scaling solutions and layer 2 blockchains looks like. So really excited to introduce this panel. I'll go ahead and kick off for introductions. Peter, do you want to get us started off?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. I'm a senior partnership manager at Off-Chain Labs, primarily focused on DeFi. And my background is that I used to work at Parity and Tendermint, so I kind of did the whole Cosmos and Polkadot gambit, and now I'm here in the Ethereum space.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Josh, go next.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Josh Kreitz. I lead developer relations at Aztec Network. We're a roll-up focused on privacy on Ethereum.
Amazing. Great to have you here. Neil, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Neil, founder of Clips, and we offer customizable rollups as a service, which under that I use the Solana virtual machine.
Awesome. Great. Smeet, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hey, my name's Smith. I lead DeFi strategy at OP Labs, building the Optimism Collective. My experience lies in technical and the derivative space, but all the funds at scaling Ethereum at the moment. So thanks for having me.
Amazing. And then Arjun, last but not least.
Hey guys, I'm Arjun. I'm the head of ecosystem at Mantle Network. Mantle Network is an L2 which is being incubated by BitDAO.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, it's great to have everybody here. As everybody listening to the panel or watching this video and can tell, we have quite the varsity team lineup here. So really excited to have everyone here to kind of chat about layer 2 and scaling solutions overall. So I guess to kick us off, how have layer 2 solutions impacted the growth of DeFi and DEXs? And what role do you think that they've played in increasing the adoption of DeFi for the masses? Whoever wants to get us kicked off, if anybody has any thoughts.
Yeah, I can kick it off. What I think is really cool about rollups and Optimism in particular is how easy it is to experiment at the execution layer. Now we can have things like, I know there's Injective that does like frequent batch offsets in their execution layer. It's much easier to spin that up as a rollup. You can do FBA, or you can take things that historically existed on L1s like clubs on the Solana L1, and now you can have a Solana rollup that has a club natively deployed. So I think that's like one interesting area, basically enabling new types of exchanges or DEXs by experimenting at the execution level, which is more easily doable with rollups.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that. There's a couple things there. One, Arbitrum recently surpassed Ethereum mainnet in transactions, and I think that this is super exciting. It's showing that Arbitrum's fulfilling Vitalik's rollup-centric Ethereum roadmap. Second, kind of to Neil's point, Arbitrum enables all these new projects to exist by offering 90 to 95% lower gas fees compared to mainnet Ethereum, and we're seeing this specifically with DEXs. So if you look at Arbitrum today, it's coming in second in DEX volume behind Ethereum mainnet and ahead of BNB chain, and this is really promising, as well as we're seeing the growth of like perps like GMX and things like Vela, as well as like options-based protocols like DopeX. And I think we'll continue to see the growth of like other more sophisticated DeFi protocols, as well as improvements on the data availability layer that's going to help to expand all these use cases going forward.
Yeah, I think that highlights a good point of kind of the ways we unlock new use cases in computing generally, not just in crypto. One way is just like massive cost reduction, right? Like when you get a 10x reduction in cost of some sort of compute, you just unlock new use cases. Like people can do stuff much cheaper, and like Arbitrum's doing a great job of doing that. All the rollups that are like implementing the EVM are doing that. But another way you unlock new use cases is just like categorically new features for developers. And that's what we're focused on at Aztec, where we're actually building a rollup where you have smart contracts that can have private state, and you can have private function execution. And you can do transactions that maintain complete user confidentiality. So yeah, it's just like a new set of features. It's not going to necessarily like bolster existing DeFi. It's going to just enable new things to be built. So yeah, there's different ways that rollups are like helping grow Ethereum and like explore this new design space. But yeah, I think the idea, Neil's point of like allowing new types of execution environments to flourish on L2 is like spot on. It's really cool to see this like diversification and exploration of what's possible.
I can zoom out just a second because I think everybody else here covered quite a bit of good stuff there, especially with the growth on DeFi indexes. I think like what I see it as is it's almost kind of like ground zero still. You need like complete decentralization to actually offer the product that's actually that we're trying to offer, which is a decentralized exchange, right? And DeFi in general. So there are quite a few hubs of computational power these days. And what does one offer versus the other? Sometimes it's fees, sometimes it's finality, speed, privacy, right? But rollups have all at least aligned on the idea of Ethereum scaling and then providing the most decentralized layer of execution. So, but anyways, to get a little deeper into like the actual question, there has been some great growth, like Peter mentioned, regarding the DEX end, quite a bit on the volume and TVL end, and a flurry of innovation on the product end as well, because L2s are pretty nascent still. We've learned a lot from history and previous scaling solutions as well. But yeah, I think one of the biggest bottlenecks today is still decentralization for DEX growth. So, and yeah, I think this is not just like a fluffy idea. Like we've spoken to many LPs that agree with that model as well. If there's a component of trust, whether it's the bridge, the sequencer, or any other centralized component, there will always be apprehension for utilizing it. And we're learning that firsthand off of user research.
I think what's also interesting is the evolution in roll-up technology as well. So, like, we've been talking about ZK roll-ups for a long time, but what we've also seen is in the next few months we're going to see several infrastructure companies go live with their ZK EVMs. So I think this is also like super interesting because it kind of opens up new kinds of use cases all over again. There are also other interesting advances in roll-up design, for example, modularity. So we see like data availability layers like EigenLayer, Celestia, etc. also start, sort of building and integrating with layer 2 solutions. So that kind of allows you to drastically then reduce like roll-up costs, go for validity improves. So I think this constant evolution, right, in roll-up technology has sort of allowed like these kind of new use cases. The fact that we are now getting better and better at security as we move into the ZK sort of age. Also, I think what's also interesting is the kind of like the new kind of business models, right, which are coming, which we see in the market. So, for example, if you look at what Coinbase, like, so for example, Coinbase and OP Collective partnering up, right? So you have on one side, an infrastructure company like the OP Collective, and on the other side, you've got Coinbase, which is like an ecosystem builder, with an NFT marketplace with like with users. So it kind of gives you a sense. So this is something we at Mantle have been talking about for quite some time as well, is that this sort of the go-to market of this sort of combination, where you've got a pure infrastructure company focused on building, the best infrastructure, and you have a company focused purely on ecosystem builder. Like this kind of partnership is what we will see in sort of the months or the years to come, right? This is a far more successful model because instead of having just one treasury and having to spend that on building business and building tech, now you've got two treasuries and two separate companies in some sense, like, each focused on a particular task, whether it's tech or ecosystem building. So this kind of combination is capitally more efficient, and at the same time has a higher chance of success. And this is kind of, what we at Mantle also expect to see in the days to come. We ourselves are looking at ZK rollup and optimistic rollup technology, and we'll work with a partner. So I think this evolution in business models as well is like pretty interesting, and we'll see different things in sort of as the year gets along.
Wow. Amazing. I think you all kind of touched on this topic about how nascent layer 2 is. And that kind of like leads to the next question of, we are what, 15 years out from the initial Bitcoin white paper. We're almost 10 years from Ethereum being launched. Layer 2 kind of was a bit of the main narrative that kind of helped launch DeFi Summer and some of these other like mass adoption events, let's say. So curious, like Coinbase is now saying that Base is a layer 3. So I guess I'm curious, how are each of you viewing where we are now and where we are going in order to get more, normal people using blockchains in DeFi?
Yeah, I can give my thoughts here. I think generally, like I mentioned, we're sort of at ground zero. There are millions of users today, but we really want billions, right? So Coinbase kind of bringing their users on chain is an amazing entry point to that. I think there are a lot of hubs of like user bases that need to be brought on chain, but the friction for coming on chain, one, is super high. And then also the value that needs to be provided is not enough for people to come on chain either. So I think there are two ends that need to be sort of worked on. So if we wanted 100 times the amount of users, 100 times the amount of TVL and whatnot, we need to provide 100 times the value. So today's world, like we're trying to focus on scaling tech, and we're doing a great job at it, right? We need that decentralization, we need security, we need to align with Ethereum, which will provide the base foundational layer for bringing all of those users on chain. But at the same time, we do need to provide that value. And we can see that by, like, we're seeing a lot of net new users and net new devs enter the space to build better products and newer innovative products. And if we keep moving that needle, I think we'll see quite a few people come on chain in the next coming years.
Also,
Yeah,
like the performance of the chain also has improved, right? So, like for example, there was a time where you could not have imagined something like DYDX or Deribit or or some sort of a on-chain order book kind of exchange with like let's say web tools like performance or parameters. Like today, because technology has become better, that this has become possible. I think also centralized exchanges also kind of realize now that they also need to start thinking in a more decentralized manner and sort of start moving their users more and more towards on-chain activity. So for example, even at Mantle, we are working with Bybit, the exchange, and then sort of want to bring their users on chain. So this is kind of again an interesting sort of sort of you could say an evolution in how in how sort of more and more users are going to be brought on chain in a very short period of time. I think through centralized exchanges you can do that quickly. And I think moment we reach a certain critical mass of users on chain, from then growth will become that much faster. So I think exchanges now doing this is like, I think, very helpful for the system, because if the tech had not improved, then this would be like 5-7 years away. So I think mass adoption will now will sort of come faster than probably what we thought before.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is I think we've seen exchanges take this route for a while now. This happened all the way back when I was at Tendermint with Binance. Using Tendermint, if you look at the underlying chain of BNB chain, it's Tendermint based. Same thing with Polygon's POS chain. And so I think there's also other fintech organizations out there that are working on creating products that are regulated that can help bring in more users. And I think that this is going to help a lot with mass adoption as well.
I think one last part about mass adoption is making sure that it complies with whatever regulatory restrictions are out there. So that means things like OPEC compliant chains, having KYC chains for real world assets, whatever is required in order to get there and meet regulators where their heads at, in order to like essentially enable people to like a publicly traded company to spin up a chain.
Just gonna add, like, reflecting on Bitcoin being 15 years ago, Ethereum around 10, and just like the evolution of the tech we've seen in that time. I hear the term Cambrian explosion a lot, just in terms of like the diversification of technology and like kind of exploring a design space. but like every generation, every cycle, it like shifts where we're doing this exploration. And I agree, we definitely need to get this mass adoption phase, but also just like understanding where it's going to come from is really hard to predict. I think just doing this exploration is like key for success, because we do find successes in each generation of this happening. And then we just like kind of double down on that, like Ethereum kind of becoming the roll-up centric space. Like that was not clear a while ago. And even just like NFTs as like a consumer, the PFP NFTs as being like the first real like consumer use case. Like, I mean, I missed that. I think Vitalik mentioned he missed that. Like a lot of people that have been in the space for a long time just didn't see it coming. And like I imagine a lot of adoption will just come from these spaces where people are just like playing and exploring and doing things because they can with new tech. And then like product market fit we'll discover it as we go. So I really like, participating in this process of like, hey, let's explore what's possible and like build cool things that we think are interesting, share what we learn, and then just keep building stuff.
That's amazing. I kind of want to riff on that actually for a second. Talking about like the Cambrian explosion, and like let's say that is, new diversified dApps coming online, new and larger, I guess, users or user bases coming onto these blockchains. I guess in all of your minds, like what's going to get us there in today, or like what are you kind of thinking about on your roadmap that's going to help kind of like reach that next level explosion of new users coming into the space? Like what is kind of everyone looking at when you're kind of like thinking about that?
I think there's several things, and Smith like touched base on a few of them. So one in particular is, we still need scalability improvements. There's work that's being done by a lot of folks on EIP 4844, which is proto-dank sharding, that's going to help to, further lower the cost for rollups. The second I'd say is around account abstraction. We're already seen with this, this with like a lot of the ZK teams like ZK Sync and Stark, where enabling this. And I think, with the advent of like ERC 4337, I think that's going to help a lot. And then kind of like what I said earlier, having more regulated products that are going to be able to reach, mass adoption that regulators are going to be okay with, I think can help to get us there.
Yeah, as tech, we're looking a lot at just like kind of new cryptography that enables new features. So yeah, we have a zero knowledge proof programming language that just makes it easier to write proofs. It's called Noir. But building this as like a public good for not just the blockchain community, but anybody that's interested in building zero knowledge proofs. Like I'm pretty convinced there's going to be unicorn like Web2 companies that are built using zero knowledge proof technology. And like, I love seeing that the blockchain industry has found a way to like basically fund this research. They pushed the state of the art like so far in just a handful of years, and like zero knowledge proofs were discovered in the 80s or something. But yeah, we're definitely looking at this sort of tech in terms of how it can help with scaling, but it's more on like the new like feature unlocks in terms of privacy. And then behavior dynamics in game theory change significantly when you actually have privacy. So DAO structures can change, the way we like DAOs fund things can change. Private voting is a super interesting domain. Like I know Nouns DAO currently has a proposal out for like figuring out private voting using for Nouns holders. We're definitely exploring like how to make this possible, and like we are so close. It's gonna be really exciting when this exists, and then all DAOs can leverage.
Yeah, I totally agree on all the points about ZK proofs and ZK rollups in general. Especially the clips we're interested in being systems as a service, things like Risk Zero or Axiom and related to that is like the proving hardware And which just as a side point, I'm interested in what the value accrual will end up looking like between execution like Eclipse and the proving systems or hardware that we end up using. Aside from that, really interested in the kinds of new mechanics that we can enable, similar to like Tornado Cash is the simplest that you can enable with ZK proofs, but like maybe new game mechanics or things like that, I think are really interesting to start seeing.
And also like mass market use cases like social networks. It's like now like what we've seen with Lens protocol, right? And what we're seeing even with like game tooling, where it's becoming easier and easier to interact with the chain. I think like when once we start seeing these kind of mass market use cases is when we'll sort of see faster adoption in some sense. And luckily, like we were discussing right about ZK technology, like the performance parameter is slowly getting there, where you can have that kind of a UI UX which let's say Web 2 users used to, but now enabled by Web 3, where you have NFTs. There's a new kind of commerce, different way of sort of interacting with each other, and transacting with each other. So I think this is interesting. And when you throw like we were discussing just now, privacy also into the mix, then you kind of solved several problems at once. For the user, where sort of things like identity, things like information, all of these things get solved in an elegant manner, in a sort of you could say highly scalable infrastructure. So I think several tick boxes, and this is so interesting, right? How quickly we got here. Like we always felt ZK was 4, 5, 6 years away, but now suddenly like it's right. It's almost here. So I think this sort of kind of gives us a sense that in this year and beyond, we will begin to see those kind of use cases take off, and as we move towards like from let's say single digit million users now to double and then triple digits and then sort of beyond, as we start looking at scale at the level of let's say Android or iOS. So yeah.
I'll just echo a bit of like Peter's points, because I think they really align with a lot of the stuff that we've been working on. With 4844 and account abstraction as bottlenecks on the friction side, we've talked to like so many devs these days that like spend like 6 figures on just rebalancing one market per month, and it's like an absurd amount when we need to get that down quite a bit. And on the other side, the developer angle, I think we're realizing that there are great devs that are ready to build, but they need a bit of activation energy. I actually spoke to Arjun about this a couple months ago regarding DeFi being extremely complicated. And if you take a developer from like Goldman Sachs, you kind of have to pair him with like a bit of activation energy and that idea so that they can actually build a successful idea. And history is so important, and nobody has like history on both the TradFi and DeFi end sometimes. We really need to like get closer on that end. So yeah, just getting a lot more developers in one place, removing friction, and then providing like quite a bit of value to bring users on chain.
As someone who used to work in banking, I can definitely agree. There's a very hard line to get over into DeFi, even though you would think that it is not as difficult, but it is pretty funny. I was going to save this question for later, but it kind of came up a lot in some of your guys' answers. So I'm going to throw this hand grenade in here. Zero knowledge, optimistic rollup. Who wins? Obviously, you guys are all in a virtual setting right now, so it can't be like a rough and tumble actual fist fight for it. So you're going to have to actually argue some good points. But curious, given how close it feels like dank sharding is, as well as it seems like we're pretty far along with zero knowledge. Coming to the forefront actually a little bit sooner than I think a lot of people, even within the industry, were thinking. Where does that leave us? What are you guys thinking about when it comes to optimistic rollup versus a zero knowledge rollup? Where's the future? Is there room for both or not?
Yeah, I think I'll just echo our CEO Steven's point, which is that we believe optimistic rollups are the best available technology today, and that's not to say that we wouldn't use ZK tech in the future. We just think that it's the best tech that's here. We have EVM equivalents, works with all the existing opcodes, so I think we're in a great position where we're at right now. And then the other thing I would say is that we're really excited about something that we're building called Stylus. So Stylus is going to enable developers to deploy programs that's written in like Rust and C that can interact with other EVM-based programs natively on Arbitrum, and we think that this is going to help to expand the the pool of developers, but also just kind of help to differentiate Arbitrum from some of the other like Solidity-based solutions that's out there.
Yeah, I'll just kind of repeat my previous point of like we're exploring design space right now, and we don't know, so it's great that we have both. It's pretty clear, I think, people who are building ZK rollups or optimistic rollups, like building ZK rollups is super hard. It's like very ambitious task. It's a very difficult engineering challenge. I think as we explore this design space, like at Aztec, we're not competing so much on the scalability front, at least right now. Like privacy is our main focus, so we're not trying to compete on that in that domain. So transactions will always be more expensive. So it depends on what you're doing, I guess is my answer. We hope to get very cheap transactions on like future versions of our network down the road. But again, like, yeah, we're building Aztec 3 in Aztec, and like we're designing it right now. We have Aztec Connect deployed on Ethereum today, but our end goal is this smart contract platform that has private state. And like realistically, this is like 18 months away. It's like a very complex thing. We're building cryptography along with a lot of engineering to make this possible. But we need like scaling today. And if optimistic rollups give us the best scaling today, then like optimistic rollups today, yes, for sure. I think, yeah, time will tell in terms of which direction we go, but there's definitely space and need for both of these things.
Yeah, to add on, I think that like every optimistic rollup should be thinking about how they like can support ZK eventually. But yeah, I totally agree that right now optimistic rollups are probably the most sane option.
Yeah, I think there's room for both. I'm biased at the moment, but optimism is honestly like I see myself running into this issue all the time. Our CEO says optimism is not an optimistic rollup company. So it's kind of like the name is just like a misnomer at the moment. But if we just zoomed out for a second, our founder Jing always mentions that what we're building is a container for decentralized compute. Otherwise, you could just run this stuff on AWS, GCP, and whatnot. And there seems to be like a level of religious tribalism that comes with the territory. But that is what's being offered, that decentralized compute. And yeah, I think there are a lot of great solutions today. ZK circuits are pretty difficult to make. I think it requires quite a few smart engineers to be building that over time. And at the end of the day, I think the pie for compute is enormously larger than we expect. And one solution being more promising than the other is not exactly how I think anyone in this space kind of looks at it from the technical angle. At ETH Denver this year, our CEO recently mentioned that he feels like there's been a paradigm shift in the L2 space right now, where there's so much openness, collaboration towards that one goal of scaling Ethereum. And I think that's what it's all about. And in that paradigm, I think DeFi, DEXs, growth, everything grows infinitely.
I think on our side at Mantle, so our testnet actually is based on the OP stack. So we've taken Optimism and we made some improvements to it. So there are a couple of things, right? So not only is there 4844, there are other ways you can sort of improve further improve performance in the optimistic stack as well. So for example, at Mantle, what we did is that along with the sequencers, we also used multi-party computation with a TSS signature scheme, right? So this is like similar to what Zengo Wallet did, or Argent to an extent, and essentially using that, there are ways you can reduce the exit time of 7 days, with sufficient decentralization, and again, sequencer nodes need to be decentralized. So I think to an extent you can squeeze a lot more performance out of an optimistic rollup design, and we continue to see that. However, that being said, like we've also been researching ZK rollups a lot. So, for example, our research team has looked at Scroll, ZK Sync, Polygon, like the test nets which have been live. We've done a level of benchmarking as well internally. I think there's a very high chance that that possibly sooner than later, maybe in the next 6 to 9 months, etc., like ZK EBM performance will reach a point where essentially it would become in some sense, the dominant, let's say, roll up or go to technology. And that's also why, like, stacks like OP Stack also have the option that, in the future you can add, let's say, a ZK prover as well, depending on the kind of chain you want to run. So I think at some level these technologies will sort of converge. As such, the EIP 4844 will improve both rollups, ZK and optimistic. So I think we will see more of ZK in the time to come. And I think all optimistic stacks also will leave that door open where, where in a sort of a true modular architecture, you would have, let's say, chain transactions, data availability, and the proving part, whether fraud proof or ZK proof, as separate sort of layers in some sense. So as long as you have a modular architecture, you can actually kind of really go very, let's say, elegantly from optimistic rollups to ZK rollups and beyond with whatever the technology might be in the future. So yeah, so that's why I think stacks like OP, where it's modular in nature, are going to be the stacks of the future, and then there will be a separate arms race on the prover side about which prover is better, and you'll see different companies develop those. Similarly, we are already seeing that on the data availability side. There'll be an arms race. There'll be like 5 or 6 different companies solving that. So I think modular architecture is the way forward, and then this accommodates both kind of proofs. So as these proofs tend to evolve, the user or the chain operator can then choose that, okay, you can use optimistic, you can use ZK, or maybe some hybrid of both. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to see with evolution in this design. And with modular architecture, we can like sort of see more interesting setups, which some might be, like I said, both optimistic and ZK in certain circumstances.
Wow, thanks. You kind of actually started to preempt a lot of the next question that I had. Is we're kind of, it feels like we're approaching somewhat of a maturation stage for layer twos. So I'm kind of curious, do you think there's a need for or I guess like we're having this conversation a year from now, 2 years from now, are we going to be talking about layer 3, layer 4, layer 5? How far does it need to get until the user's abstracted or the blockchain is abstracted enough for retail users to not even understand that they're using blockchain? So curious on if you guys have any thoughts around what does the future now hold, and are there other layers that we're kind of missing or potentially might need in order to have this scale to, let's say, all 7.5 billion people on the planet?
I think like the Cosmos team kind of had the right vision of like having all these different chains in the beginning, like what Jay and Ethan were doing. And you kind of saw this too with Polkadot, with parachains, and what Gavin Wood tried to do. I think that there will be more around layer 3s and customized layer 3s that can enable some of these additional use cases. Yeah, so that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure, but going off that Cosmos idea, I could imagine a diverse ecosystem of layer 2s. One of the biggest problems I see with layer 2s today is like we have each layer 2 is its own execution environment, and there's no composability between them. With Aztec Connect, which is on Ethereum today, you can actually interact atomically with Ethereum layer 1 contracts from the layer 2. And from what I understand, this is possible because of using zero knowledge proofs. So like one thing I can imagine in the future is layer 2 is atomically interacting with other layer 2s, just using proof systems, which kind of like, goes to this, reminds me of Cosmos, where there's these chains that can just interact. But in the case of Ethereum and layer 2s, all the settlements just happening on Ethereum. So the consensus is a little different. But yeah, you get these different execution environments. But maybe that's enough. I don't know how many transactions we need as humanity, like how many transactions per day, what's the throughput of human, what's the need. But just thinking about of layer 3s that I know of today, and one of the most interesting projects I've seen is a roll up on Starknet. It's actually like an Urbit rollup, which is like a peer-to-peer personal operating system. They add a value layer into it using a layer 3 rollup. And I think that's more to take advantage of the unique properties of Starknet itself. They can just like build a better system there. So kind of that idea of exploring new execution environments in layer 2, and then people finding ways to provide valuable user experiences in those unique execution environments, because the EVM itself is limiting in a lot of ways. So not really a direct answer, but it will definitely be fun to watch this play out and watch teams build.
That's like a interesting approach, which Josh mentioned, right? That eventually, like I think the trick to answering this question is to understand why you would need an additional layer in the first place, right? So essentially, why we talk about layer twos or layer threes essentially is because as our need for more and more decentralized compute sort of sort of as our needs increase, and as you need more and more throughput, one can imagine like more layers. But what we're also seeing is that the evolution of, let's say, performance within the layer, like let's say 2 itself, right, within the layer itself, before we add, like let's say, layers on top. So what we've seen with some of the innovations from, let's say, some other layer 1 blockchains as well, like for example, I don't know if you guys saw block STM with Aptos, right, which is like parallel processing of transactions, and then you sort of use like a different consensus, like a Bullshock Naval kind of a consensus, like a DAG based consensus to do, like, instead of doing transactions sequentially, you do them in parallel, and then your consensus sort of runs as a separate layer. So there are different ways you can like kind of improve performance within the layer itself. I don't expect to see like so many layers, maybe layer 2 and then layer 3, and then I think also in the time to come, the chain performance itself will get to a point where we may not necessarily have to build additional layers, right? Also, to the point that you don't necessarily, like, decentralized compute is not the answer for a lot of different problems as well, right? So while like we always debate this, right, and with let's say first time let's say blockchain users, that not everything needs to be on chain. And of course, we would love it if more things were on chain, and many things need to be, but many things also don't need to be. And what that means is that beyond a certain performance parameter or a performance point, you won't necessarily need, like, extra scalability will not add value, right? Maybe further decentralization will add value. Right. So we see that also, right? Like, so for example, with RPC networks nowadays, we see, like, decentralized RPC networks, right? So because beyond a certain point now, decentralization now matters more. A certain improvement in throughput may not yield a better outcome with Web3. So I think that's kind of which way the technology will go, and we may not need as many layers. Like, we would have to solve other problems would become more important than this sort of increase in throughput.
Yeah, I'll just echo a bit of what Arjun was saying there. Not every idea needs decentralized compute. So there's like billions of people in the world, but not every single action that they take will be on chain. So it's also important to note that. But with that said, I think you set it up in a great way, Alex, where there are 7.5 billion people. How are we going to offer that sort of compute layer to people? And there are a lot of takes towards that solution. We think that there are solutions that need isolated execution, which is why we offer that L2 or L3 experience. But there are ideas that need interoperability, right? So that's how this whole vision of like the super chain ever came about, where if we have a bunch of these chains that offer or under a similar shared security model, you could do a lot better with the interoperability network as well. So yeah, overall, I think there's going to be a lot of different models that come out over time, a lot of iteration. We're not at the end state. And to provide value for 7.5 billion people, we're going to need to continue iterating for quite a while.
Yeah, also totally agree. To echo that point, not all user interactions should be on chain. And like, if you keep on applying layers of abstractions to the user to the point where they don't even realize that they're interacting with the blockchain, that typically means that you're compromising on some trust or some level of security. So you're kind of losing the purpose of using a blockchain, since like more at levels of abstraction typically means there's some piece of software sitting in between, which is now handling your keys or doing stuff like that. So yeah, I would rather just not have those interactions on chain at all. But yeah, definitely the interoperability stuff that Josh mentioned is really interesting, especially interoperability solutions between layer twos that leverage the fact that they have like shared visibility of a DA layer. I think that that's going to be really important.
Awesome. And you're literally teeing me up for my next question. Interoperability is pretty much like the biggest buzzword of today's crypto world. I can't tell you how many times I heard at ETH Denver people talking about the multi-chain future or the interchain future or whatever it may be. So I'm curious, with all of these kind of somewhat separate layer twos and layer ones that kind of come into existence that are using different execution environments, different languages, things like that. What does the future actually hold for interoperability as far as layer twos are concerned, as far as DeFi is concerned? Take this answer however you guys want to, but kind of curious on some thoughts here.
Sure. So I used to work with Chris Goes when I was at Tendermint, and he's the guy who pioneered IBC, which is the protocol that connects all the Cosmos-based chains. And I also saw what the Parity team did with XCM to connect all the parachains together. And I think what we have today in the Ethereum environment is primarily stuff that's around token transfers. So we have a lot of different bridges that's out there, such as Hop Seller Connects. A whole bunch of these teams that are building. I think it's going to expand to more use cases beyond that. So you'll have things like, smart contract calls that you can do between chains. And I think what we're seeing today is that a lot of DeFi-based teams, they go multi-chain, they deploy everywhere. Gaming teams kind of do less of this, but we'll likely see. I think over time, as interoperability improves, teams may just choose to deploy on, Optimism or choose to deploy on Arbitrum because they can connect to all these chains and access liquidity and do stuff like that.
Yeah, bridging and message passing will only get better. One thing that I'm excited for in the further distant future of Aztec 3, where we have this privacy preserving rollup that's built on zero knowledge proofs, we can actually build zero knowledge light clients that we could basically do our settlement on Ethereum layer 1, and then we could have contracts on whatever EVM chain or really any smart contract chain that's doing proof validation, and users could then deposit into the Aztec L2 from any chain that has one of these ZK Lite clients. Not only can they deposit assets into Aztec from those chains, then if you wanted to go from Solana to Optimism, you deposit your tokens on Solana to the Aztec network and then withdraw them on Optimism. So then the rollup becomes a bridge that has all of the features of a complete privacy preserving smart contract chain as well. This has been talked about internally at Aztec, and I have no idea how difficult this will be to build, but it's at least theoretically possible. And I imagine we'll be just working towards systems like this in the future. That's just going to make it make the assets themselves just more fluid across all of these things. So yeah, it'd be fun to figure out how to build this.
Also, bridge security, sort of thinking also has to improve, right? So with bridges, we've seen equal parts, so many hacks as well, and that every time something like that happens, we get to see the cracks and the vulnerabilities in the current generation of bridges, right? Where you have let's say node networks or staking or cryptoeconomic staking in some sense to sort of improve improve security. But I think with ZK, some of those problems will get solved. I think ZK is also interesting. There are different ways you can use to for example, with one option is with Aztec. There are some other innovations as well, like what we've seen with EigenLayer, where essentially you sort of build, you sort of have trust as a separate layer in some sense, where you're able to with E3 staking have a sort of a trust sort of layer, a decentralized trust layer, which then you can leverage, right? Based on the cryptoeconomic security, you can leverage that for bridging. Makes bridging significantly cheaper and with higher throughput with that kind of a technique. So I think better security paradigms are required, without which I think bridging can't truly succeed. And I think the other way of looking at bridging also is that maybe it needs to become, and like what we saw with Cosmos, right? And with IBC, bridging becomes something which is integrated at the at sort of the chain infrastructure level, right? Where networks have already have bridging built in, from natively, and then as chains spawn, etc. Either with, let's say, common sequencers, or like technologies like zk sync, zk porter, or something like that could be used. So I think chain security has to improve, or possibly in the future or in the time to come, like what some of the thinking which is we seeing like with oracles, or with, let's say, bridging. Maybe they need to in the future merge and become a part of the infrastructure itself. And sort of, so thereby it sort of, you could say, borrows decentralization and trust from the entire network versus, let's say, a small set of nodes. So that's kind of how I'm seeing, like, networks think about it, like sort of the research which is going on in this space. So yeah, so interesting to see how bridging will evolve as well.
Yeah, that's like kind of how IBC works when you like implement it with modules and stuff. But yeah, I definitely agree that I feel like the gold standard is single block finality, or for like atomic composition between rollups. So more primitives that enable that. Like I think what's is really cool that Skip is looking at how to do cross chain flash loans if like two rollups both have visibility of Celestia, and ideally you don't have to encode the fork choice rule or anything about the other L2 into like the first L2. Like if you have two layer twos that are composed, ideally you don't have to like break any abstraction barriers. But I think concepts like that are going to be more important.
Yeah, I think interoperability is an interesting question, and a lot of these guys talked about some of the tech angle and how it works with each layer. If we take a look at the product layer, zooming out for a second, I think about like, why does a product want to go multi-chain, interchain, or cross-chain? Is it liquidity? Is it users? Is it something else entirely? Do they want access to something else? There are a lot of reasons, and I think what we kind of landed on is cross-chain is an extremely difficult thing to accomplish in a decentralized way. And we're working towards a better future. So that's why we wanted to go towards that shared security model, where if like the assets of Base and Optimism are locked in the same bridge, for example, sharing some of that message passing is a lot easier because the security is kind of shared. And yeah, they're all different takes. There's so many different takes to it. I think it's still being worked on, but yeah, in like the end state, we're hoping that like people don't have to interact with multiple different chains with multiple different security models. And as soon as you add different security models and different chains, you add a bit of risk. So we really want to try to get away from that model long term.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm very excited for the future here. I'm definitely getting goosebumps just thinking about kind of all of the progression we're going to make in this space. We have time for just one final rapid fire question. I'm going to throw this grenade in here and then probably drop off. Token versus no token. I know some of you guys chains do have them, some don't. Quick 20-30 seconds, is that the future or is that not?
I can start. I think it's context dependent. Clearly tokens are beneficial for like incentivizing certain behaviors, like maintaining decentralization, uptime. Like tokens work really well for Bitcoin and Ethereum. They work really well for a lot of projects. So yeah, highly context dependent, but for decentralized networks, it's helpful for aligning incentives.
I'll echo what Josh said there. We have a token, so we obviously went down that route. It's incredibly important for the decentralization of control and ownership part of it. Otherwise, we all fall victim to running some sort of centralized network long term. So yeah, I think it is a very important part of the community. We've seen in many cases, there's a bit of that religious tribalism that I talked about as well. But if we kind of take that component out of it, it is extremely important to decentralize control of your protocol.
Yeah, agreed. That's like the primary purpose of the token. Then you could also use it as like a way of penalizing spam or things like that. Which, I mean, you could also solve that with like some sort of fee market like Solana's, and then you would just charge the fee in some other currency or something. But yeah, the token is like a reasonable tool for like price discovery for that.
I don't know if I have
Cool.
too much more to
Oh,
add, but yeah, I
yeah.
just wanted to say I echo like a lot of what Smith and Josh and what Neil said.
Nice. Well, I'm excited for all these tokens at some point. Arjun, sorry to cut you off. If you wanted to share one last thought before we wrap up.
And I was just saying that ultimately, I think just to echo that point, that it's so important for also chains to become decentralized. Like, so for example, what we've seen is that this evolution of a chain, typically what we've seen with all blockchains is that, like, let's start out in, let's say, a centralized manner, right? With decisions being made by a small number of people, then over a period of time, they become decentralized and, and sort of should be operated essentially like a DAO. Like, this is something which needs to happen sooner. I think more and more blockchains need to become sort of DAOs in some sense, or be run by DAOs so that there is more transparency. We like only, I think, when there is some scam or something happens is when we begin to see, the problems in teams building decentralized infrastructure but are centralized themselves. And then this creates a conflict of interest, right? Where for example, resources are spent frivolously without really contributing to the chain, and or being honest to the token holders. So I think so even like blockchain projects need to be a lot more decentralized. So for example, at Mantle, we are incubated by BitDAO, right? So I'm responsible. So the entire team is sort of responsible to the DAO. So we have to be like a lot more transparent in sort of our communication, right? And what we do. And what I've kind of realized is that this model should be more prevalent, where more teams are held accountable. And sort of and that accountability can only come when you start to become more transparent and more decentralized. So I think this is also something which needs to happen, so that teams become much more accountable to their own token holders.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for such an insightful panel. We're really excited to, for Sushi to be able to partner with all of you to bring our, respective ecosystems, the knowledge and insights that all of you guys have provided for today. So thank you all so much for joining this panel. We're really excited to kick off our ETH Dubai hackathon with these discussions. So thank you all so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alex.
Right. Thank you for having me.